third important preseason football game on Saturday night here as the Detroit Lions come to town. And meantime, we have Oriole baseball each and every night this week to keep us cozy in Baltimore, in D.C., and we would love for this rivalry to sort of catch up. They don't play too often, and certainly a lot at stake, certainly on the Orioles side here this week with the Nationals around. Dave Jagler calls all things Nationals baseball. Also a Syracuse alum who you can follow out on Twitter at Dave Jagler. That's Jagler. And he joins us as the Orioles and the Nets duke it out here this week. Dave, I mean, the whole thing kind of overshadowed on your side of the fence by the Strasburg injury, right?
Well, I mean, that was certainly the big news for us on Monday with Strasburg supposed to be starting the first game of the series, and it's his second stint on the DL. Now, Strasburg had pitched pretty poorly in his last three starts. I mean, he was 15-1, and you're kind of, okay, well, you know, he's due for a couple of bad ones, and he pitched a couple of games in the heat and humidity in D.C., which are very tough on him because he perspires so much, and he was having trouble gripping the baseball. But then he went out to Denver and just got shelled and gave up 9 runs in an inning and 2/3. And sort of some red flags went off, but everyone maintained that he was healthy, no problem. He did his side session when the ball club was in Atlanta, but then we got the news just before game 1 of the series that he was going to be shut down with the elbow soreness. Now, everyone from general manager Mike Rizzo to Dusty Baker, the manager, to Strasburg himself is saying that it's just a precaution and it's no big deal. So we have to take that at face value. I'm sure some Nationals fans were thinking that, you know, the Tommy John surgery, the second one's coming right down the pike, but you know, that's an overreaction. And hopefully it's just kind of a 15-day vacation here to get him back on track.
Well, when you have an 8-game lead, right, and it feels like nobody's coming to get you, this is sort of, I don't say rarefied air. I mean, a couple years ago, the Nationals had a nice, tidy little lead as well, and the Orioles had the same thing 2 years ago. It's a little different when you're independent race and fighting and clawing every game, and I know they'd like to be the 1 seed, and the Cubs have, you know, sort of pulled out, and I spent a couple days out there chasing Pearl Jam the last couple days out at Wrigley as well. I see the fever going on out there, but the Washington thing's different to me because there was such fever for this in previous years, especially last year. There was a lot of pressure on that team. This year it felt like the air was let out a little bit, and it felt like the Mets were coming and the Marlins were coming. And we sit here on Labor Day, and it feels like Dusty Baker and just about everything they've done, and even in a down year for Harper, it's come out smelling roses so far for the Nationals, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If it was a 1-game cushion instead of 8, then maybe they take the Strasburg thing a little differently. I mean, you still have 5 to 6 weeks left in the season, so they want him healthy for the stretch run and certainly for October. But yeah, this team has had a lot go right, and last year they had everything go wrong. I mean, they were basically handed the NL pennant prior to 2015, but you've got to go out and play the games. And for the entire 162-game season, they had their starting 8 on the field for 2 games. And a good chunk of the starting 8 missed a large portion of the season. So that's no way to go about winning a division championship. And the Mets were young and hungry and made some deals at the deadline and really pulled away in the second half of the season. Now the Mets are wearing the Nationals hat from last year. Everything has gone wrong for them injury-wise. And the Nationals, outside of this Strasburg situation, have been relatively healthy. Certainly in their lineup, they've been very healthy and just an occasional pitching injury here or there. So it has been a very, very good season for them, and they're geared up for October. And I think it's a team that has something to prove in October. They've been the number 1 seed in the National League twice in the last 4 years, but they've yet to advance out of the division series round. So this is a team that wants to get there and wants to make a statement and be around for a while.
Dave Jagler calls all things Nationals on their radio team. You can hear him up and down the corridor. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Dave Jagler. That's Jagler. It really helps, too, when you go and raid your rival's closet for their best player, and they sort of let Murphy walk away after last October. The Nats were quick to sign him. What a signing. I mean, when you look at the Orioles this week and say, what Trumbo has represented and Cruz a couple of years ago, this is the time of the year when, the general managers get their report card, and certainly the report card on Murphy was a big thumbs up.
Oh, I mean, for them to potentially get the National League MVP and actually, Nestor, he was their second choice the way it worked out. Certainly the Mets didn't want him. They traded for Neil Walker, and they were happy to move on. Now, revisionist history might be that, folks in New York, well, how could the Mets let the Nationals get Murphy? Well, they basically let him walk out the door. The Nationals had a trade in place around the winter meetings for Brandon Phillips of the Reds, who played for Dusty Baker in Cincinnati, but Phillips had to agree to the trade, and he refused to do so. He wanted an extension to his contract, so the trade fell apart, and basically the next day the Nationals signed Daniel Murphy to a 3-year contract. So that's a heck of a consolation prize, and it really balanced their lineup. Last year they were so right-handed dominant, with only Harper being a legitimate threat from the left side, so he gave them a left-handed hitter, and the power that he's had. I mean, this is a guy whose career high was 14 home runs, and I think a lot of folks thought what he did in the postseason last year was fluky, but he's proven it's not. He's hit for power. He already has 90 RBIs and should be well over 100 by the end of the season, and he has led basically wire to wire the batting race in the National League. I mean, he was a really good hitter before, and what he did in October, he's carried over, and he's gotten a lot better.
I mean, I know the media there aren't piranha types, over the decade that the team has been there, but I felt like the offseason, and look, Angelos has run this mess here for 25 years. Every offseason's a show here, and especially in the losing years. But for the Nationals last offseason, you mentioned Murphy being the second choice. Certainly Dusty Baker was even further down that list after the mess they had with Bud Black. Nothing was going right in the offseason, in an offseason after, your star player was getting choked by the closer, the manager kind of lost control of everything last year, and there was a lot of controversy, and boy, have things settled down. This was the year the team was supposed to have last year, right?
Yeah, well, no question, and I think Dusty Baker's been a big part of that, because you're right, the clubhouse was in turmoil last year. The majority of the coaching staff was not retained, and it looked to be a franchise that it was somewhat in disarray, but I think Mike Rizzo has had a steady hand, and for them to end up with Dusty Baker, who is a big-time communicator in the clubhouse, and he instantly commanded respect from what he's done as a manager over his 20-year career, and so that really was a calming influence. He made it a point in the offseason to communicate with everybody on the roster and set the expectation level. I think going into the season, a lot of fans expected Jonathan Papelbon, the closer you alluded to, choking Bryce Harper, for him to be gone. But, he was with the ball club for the first 4 months of the season, and there were no issues with him in the clubhouse as far as dealing with that. So that's a credit to Dusty Baker that was not even a story, not even one day, when Papelbon arrived in spring training. Now, performance-wise dictated that he would be replaced. It was not a chemistry issue. So, it's been a very, very good clubhouse, and that's obviously shown on the field with how they performed.
Discussing baseball diamonds with Dave Jagler, the voice of the Washington Nationals. I want to throw a shout out to Sidney Newsonoff and our friends over at Charles Newsonoff and Sons Jewelers. Thanks for tuning in out on our Facebook Live, as well as our WNST TV channel, and our sponsorship as well. Now, one last thing with the Nats. We sort of measure Machado around here against everyone, right? So we see Correa over the weekend and Altuve. We saw Colorado and their young guns. Obviously, every time we see Mike Trout's or the Bryce Harper's, that conversation begins. Same thing even with the kid down in Florida. There are plenty of great young players around. Bryce Harper was last year's $400 million player, and at some point, somebody's going to break the bank and get this thing done. This hasn't been the greatest campaign for him, but it's been kind of lost a little bit in how good the team has been, that there hasn't been as much pressure maybe on him personally as there would have been if they're 4 games back and fighting right now.
Yeah, but the one thing about Bryce is he's all about winning. Yeah, he had an historic season, just period, not even for someone his age, but period, with his slugging percentage on base, homers and all that stuff. He had an historic season. But what did it get the team? They ended up with 83 wins. So, he is all about winning. If he's 0 for 4 and the team wins, he's fine. And that's a credit to him. I know he has some frustration and wants to do very well, but he is more than happy with playing second banana this year to Murphy as far as in the MVP race. And the hope is, he was special in the month of April this year. It was a carryover to last year. He was player of the month. I think had 11 home runs after the first month of the season. But then he went to Chicago, and Joe Madden walked him 13 times in one 4-game series, and it kind of got him off track, got him a little over-anxious, and he started jumping at pitches. And he's had some mechanical issues with his swing. But the hope is this guy is so talented that if he can figure it out here in the month of September and going into October, if he can play like the Bryce Harper from 2015, I mean, this team's going to be tough to beat. This lineup will be pretty special.
I remember the first time I met Jason Worth on the backfields in Fort Lauderdale as an Oriole hotshot draft pick. And, I mean, it feels like it's been 20 years. And I know he signed for all the money down there, and there was questions about that after the Philadelphia thing. He's been written off a bunch, and he's been maligned, and is he worth it and all that stuff. Still doing it. I mean, still putting up numbers, major league numbers, and a guy you want on your team and in your clubhouse. And feels like he's been a little rejuvenated under Dusty, too.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, everyone said, like you said, when that contract came down, how could you pay Jason Worth that much money? But if you look at actually what he's produced over the life of the contract and how salaries have risen, you really say it's been a fair contract for both sides. You wouldn't say he's overpaid, but you wouldn't say he's underpaid either.
Hey, I would say he was as good a value as A-Rod or Teixeira or some of these contracts we've really, guys that don't even fulfill their contract, I guess is the point.
Right, because he's aged well. I mean, that's one thing when they signed him. I remember Mike Rizzo saying this is a guy who takes tremendous care of his body, and so many of these 9-10-year contracts, after the fifth year, it's like you want to close your eyes because it's a shell of the former player, and you paid him for what he did, not what he's going to be. And Worth is still productive into year 6 of the contract. I mean, this is one of those rare long-term contracts where the guy is producing almost to what he did in year 1 of the contract. So, not to mention what he's meant in the clubhouse. I mean, he's been a team leader throughout his time here. So, yeah, and the key for Jason was when you sign that kind of contract initially, you're expected to be the star player. And Jason Worth, when he was in Philadelphia and was very successful, he wasn't the man. He was supporting cast behind Brian Howard and Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins, and he was very good as the 4th, 5th option. Well, that's what he is here now with Harper and with Murphy and other guys on this roster. Ramos has had a silver slugger kind of season as the catcher. So if he's like the 4th or 5th option, if you will, or 4th or 5th best hitter on the team, you've got a heck of a lineup. So he can kind of sit there and pick his spots and deliver his big hits. He's had some huge clutch hits in a series win over the Cubs this year. He's had a really nice season, and he's aged well as the contract has gone along.
Dave Jagler, longtime voice of the Nationals, as well as doing baseball in lots of places and lots of towns. And you're old school, right? I mean, you did a lot of minor league ball to work your way through this thing, right?
Well, I mean, you mentioned I was from Syracuse. I bounced all over the place. I was in Charlotte, did some Charlotte Knights games down there, did some basketball. I was with the Pawtucket Red Sox, Boston's AAA team. So this is year 11 with the Nationals. I missed the first year when baseball went back to D.C. in 2005, but it seems like this is the only place I've ever been. I've been here so long.
Well, it's funny you say Pawtucket. My wife pronounces it properly. People from out like here call it Pawtucket.
Pawtucket.
Yeah, and people there don't like that very much, right?
No, you immediately you stamp yourself as an outsider if you say Pawtucket.
Oh, it's like Bowie instead of Bowie.
Say it really fast.
Hey, last thoughts for you on the Orioles here this week, and clearly these games mean a whole lot more to the Orioles at this point than they do the Nationals. The Orioles are on this sort of slippery slope right now where the pitching and the hitting, getting it all lined up, has been very, very difficult, and they've been a better team at home, but not really this week heading into this thing. It's choppy water right now, I think, for the Orioles, and this thing could go either way for them.
Yeah, I mean, the American League wild card chase, not to mention they're obviously right in the thick of the division race. I mean, yeah, if you play well, then you're figuring you can chase down Toronto, but if they don't, then they've got the Mariners breathing down their necks and Houston and teams like that, and Kansas City seems to be charging hard on the outside. So it could be a real interesting month of September. I mean, I personally love their lineup, and I can only go on when the Nationals play them. Their bullpen always seems to pitch well against the Nationals. When they get O'Day back, that'll obviously be a huge piece. But you wonder if they're just a little bit short in the starting rotation. And I'm not saying anything that nobody doesn't know around here. But if they can certainly out-hit their pitching, they have a chance to get there. But when you go to the postseason and you're facing the better pitching, a lot of times the lineups that rely on the home runs have trouble scoring in those October games when you're facing the best pitching around the league.
That's why we play 162. You like these games late in the year, Dave? I would like more Orioles Nationals games, and I guess in places where they don't have a rival. I guess in Chicago they don't need any more White Sox and Cubs, and in New York Yankees Mets. It's been going on for 2 decades now, but this is one of those things here that I kind of want to feel it a little bit more than we have. And I mean, I guess these games would take on more value in August than in playing them in May and June the way we used to.
Yeah, I mean, last year they had a September series, and it's unfortunate both teams were down last year. I think they played with like a week and a half to go in the season, and the Orioles were kind of out of it, and the Nationals were dangling by a thread. But yeah, it would have been huge if you had both teams fighting for something at that point. I mean, the biggest thing would be is if both teams, and they've kind of lined up in the postseason in 12 and 14, but got knocked off before they could get to the finish. If you ever had a Beltway World Series, I mean, that would be the ultimate to get this rivalry really stirred up. I mean, I think, at least in the stands, it seems to me kind of a friendly deal because, I mean, you have family members, at least folks who are at Nationals Park when I see them, and one kid's got the Orioles stuff on and one kid's got the National stuff on. So it's not like an angry rivalry like maybe Yankees and Mets, so it's a friendly one. So it would be nice to see the competition step up a notch if you played in October.
Yeah, I'd like it to see it not be friendly. Like, I have no use for the Redskins at all, and they're going to come up here and play for the second time in 21 years this year, and we're not going to like them much on that Sunday. I don't know that anybody here has that Nationals feeling because they've never really beaten us in anything that's mattered, and I know every Nationals fan, to some degree, has some pair of orange underwear or an old towel or an old hat, Brooks Robinson, something in the back of their closet, because that's just part of being a baseball fan if you're 50 or 60 years old in D.C., right?
Right. Well, because there was no baseball, so you were an Oriole fan or maybe not a fan at all. So, yeah, a lot of folks in D.C. still like the Orioles, and some gravitated to the Nationals when the Nats came back, so maybe like both teams because, I can like an NL team and I can like an AL team because we don't really play for the same thing. So, yeah, it's an interesting rivalry. It is not the really intense one like a Yankees and Mets.
No, we need some more memorable games, I guess. Mr. Angelos would like an I-95 World Series. You could bet your bottom dollar on that. Dave, I appreciate it.
As with Mr. Lerner.
Well, they'd still be fighting over who's getting the money, I'm sure, at some point. But that thing's going to go. That's the eternal. That's the 100-year war, I think, over that $400 million.
I don't even want to talk about that one. Jeez.
I talk about that plenty, so you don't have to talk about it because, in the end, someone's going to cut a check to someone somewhere somehow, but we'll find out. All I know is I'm running out of popcorn.
I'll see none of it. That's fine.
Dave, take care of yourself. Enjoy the baseball this week. Great having you on, man.
All right, thanks, man.
I enjoyed our chat. Dave Jagler from the Nats radio team, and you can follow his journey out on Twitter at Dave Jagler. That's Jagler for all things Nats. We've got Nats, we've got Orioles, we're going to have some Yankees this weekend, as well as the Detroit Lions and the Ravens. And I'm going around the sports world a little bit, talking a little residue, a little fallout of the Olympics, amongst other things. You can always find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from anywhere you are. Our morning newspaper, it's your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, if there is breaking news, that hits your mobile device first, but you got to be on the WNST Tech service. Sign up for that. 10 years running, our best service. Breaking news as it happens. You will always be the smartest sports fan in your Baltimore group if you're on it. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5, so make sure you tune him in, and you can email me anytime, anywhere. I'm a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.